Wandering through the crowd. Hey friends, tonight we journey back through cobbled paths and whispering breezes, through a world scented with spice and shadow, into the heart of a woman who carried her hope like a secret flame. Her story begins not with a miracle, but with a step, and another, towards something her heart could not quite explain. If you thought miracles always came with loud voices and crowds cheering, think again. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing in the middle of a crowded street. The day is warm, the air thick with voices and footsteps. Sandals scrape stone, sellers call out their prices, pigeons flutter from rooftops, and someone is playing a flute far off, sweet, lonely notes that wander like wind through fig leaves. But in the middle of it all, your eyes find her, a woman. Her face half-shielded beneath a thin veil. Her steps are cautious. She doesn't move like the others, full of energy and confidence. She walks like someone with history under her skin, pain in her bones, and longing etched into her every motion. You don't know her name yet. No one here really does. She's just another person trying to move through the world without being seen. You walk behind her now, matching her quiet pace. She doesn't speak, but everything in her says, "I'm searching." And then you begin to hear it too, something beneath the noise. A name, passed from mouth to mouth like water in a dry land. Jesus. Jesus is here. You feel a small thrill rise through the crowd. People begin turning, shifting, peering over shoulders. Some begin walking faster, others lifting children up high to see better. But the woman, she doesn't run. She just walks, steady, slow, intent, like someone whose hope has learned to walk without rushing. You notice her hands. They're clasped together at her waist, trembling slightly, as if they've prayed too long, as if they still aren't sure they'll be answered. She steps to the side, letting a family pass. Her feet are bare now. She must have slipped out of her sandals somewhere along the way. Her robe brushes the ground, stirring a faint dust behind her. You stay close. Something in you wants to follow her, not out of pity, but reverence. Because even in her weakness, she carries something powerful, the courage to keep going. She pauses once, near a narrow alleyway. Her breath comes shallow. You hear her whisper, maybe a prayer, maybe a name. Her head bows for a moment, and you see her shoulders lift and fall with a long, quiet sigh. Then she continues, a little further, a little deeper into the crowd. You look around, and it hits you. She is not the only one here hoping for something. People press in from all sides, some with questions, some with wounds, some just curious. But this woman, you feel it. She's not here for curiosity. She's here because she believes that just maybe, today, everything could change. She hasn't seen him yet, but she listens for him in every shift of the crowd. She watches for him with the eyes of someone who's lost too much time to turn back now. You glance at the sky. The sun hangs high, pouring soft gold over rooftops and skin. Dust glows in the light. Doves flutter from wall to wall. And somewhere ahead, the crowd is starting to shift. The air changes, just slightly, like a hush before a song begins. And though no one says it aloud, you know it too. He's near. Jesus. You feel it in your spine. You see it in the way the crowd leans, the way they part, not like he demands it, but because his presence carries gravity. But still, she doesn't run. She pauses again, hands pressed gently against the wall, steadying herself. Her breath is shorter now, but her gaze is steady. She's looking through the crowd, not for a throne, not for a sermon, just for him. And somewhere inside you, something stirs. You know this moment, maybe not in body, but in spirit. That longing, that silence, that fragile thread of faith that pulls you forward when everything else says stop. She walks again. One hand lightly brushing the stones beside her, the other tucked close to her chest. She doesn't know what she'll say. She doesn't know what he'll do. She only knows she has to try. What would you have done in her place? Would you have waited one more day? Would you have believed the ache too deep? Or would you, like her, have kept walking? 12 years of silence. You walk beside her still. The crowd thickens with every step, but your focus remains with the woman. Her warm robe brushing the dust, her fingers grazing the stones of nearby buildings. Her body is small, her movements slow, but her soul, you can feel it pulsing with quiet resolve. 12 years. That's how long she has carried this affliction. 12 years of bleeding, of pain, of being unclean in the eyes of others. 12 years of isolation. Not always physical, but spiritual. You glance at her again and see it not just in her posture, but in her silence. A silence not from peace, but from exhaustion. A silence born from too many days of being spoken about and too few of being spoken to. She's not a stranger to prayer. She's whispered them while lying on cold floors, cried them into blankets no one else would touch. She's prayed until her voice gave out, and then prayed in her thoughts when even tears refused to fall. You wonder what 12 years feels like in the soul. Not just the days, but the waiting, the doubt, the slow erosion of maybe into probably not. Still, she walks. She steps lightly past a woman holding a child, past a group of young men laughing, past elders seated beneath a canopy, deep in debate. None of them look at her. Or perhaps they do, and then quickly look away. It's easier that way. Because in this world, people like her were avoided, regarded as cursed, as impure. She hasn't been embraced in over a decade. Not truly, not without hesitation. Imagine that. 12 years without a touch that didn't carry judgment. 12 years of navigating daily life like a ghost in plain sight. And yet, not once does she turn back. She remembers every attempt she's made to find healing. Every visit to a physician who promised answers. Every vial of herbs. Every whispered ritual. Every coin spent. She remembers the looks. Pity. Annoyance. Disbelief. Even disgust. And she remembers walking home again and again, hands empty, heart aching, body unchanged. You want to speak to her, to say, "You are not forgotten," but you don't need to, because something tells you she already knows. At least today, in this moment, she believes again. Somewhere in those 12 years, her hope became quiet, not gone, but small, like an ember protected in cupped hands. It flickered, yes, but it never died. And now it is stirring again. You wonder what changed. Was it something she heard? Some story passed through whispered conversations? Maybe someone she met, someone whose limp was gone, or whose joy had returned. And when she asked why, they said just one name, Jesus. And maybe, just maybe, she believed that if healing could come for someone else, it could come for her too. Even now, after all this time, after so many no's, what kind of courage does it take to hope again? Not for a future idea, not for distant mercy, But for now, you look at her eyes. They scan the crowd, looking not with desperation, but with a kind of tender urgency, as if every moment counts, as if her body is telling her this is the last walk it might endure. She touches the corner of a nearby stall for balance. A child stumbles in front of her, and she pauses, waiting, letting the boy run back to his mother. The woman gives her a passing glance, then looks away. She's used to that. She doesn't even flinch anymore. You glance toward the crowd ahead. It's swelling now. You can see the backs of people pressing forward, stretching to catch a glimpse of him. And through the cracks of moving bodies, just for a heartbeat, you see him too. Jesus, a calm presence. His head slightly bowed as he listens to someone's question. His hand briefly touching the shoulder of a man beside him. He is surrounded and yet set apart. The woman sees him too, and she stops. Just for a moment. Not from fear, not from doubt, but from the weight of it all. She breathes in slowly. One hand presses to her chest. You can almost feel the thought passing through her. It's real. He's real. She takes another step, and another. She's closer now, but still invisible to those around her. And maybe that's how it has to be. Because what's about to happen isn't for the crowd. It's for her. What would you carry if 12 years of silence lived in your bones? Would you dare to believe that one touch could end it? That one brush of cloth could break the rules, break the pain, and speak louder than all the years of being ignored? You watch her press forward again. And this time, her steps are no longer just slow. They are sacred.
No one could help her. You follow her into a narrower passage, the press of the crowd easing for a moment, the walls closer now, stone and shadow on either side. The sounds of the market behind her grow faint, as if the world itself is stepping back to let her pass through this memory, this ache. Because before this moment of hope, there was so much disappointment. And though she doesn't speak, you can feel it trailing behind her like a long, invisible cloak. She remembers every door she knocked on, every voice that promised healing, some gentle, some not. She remembers how they looked at her, brows pinched, hands reaching, tones practiced and polite. But no one helped her. They tried. Some offered medicines made from crushed herbs, bitter roots boiled with honey and oil. Others gave her rituals. Bathe in this river, recite this psalm, pay this coin. Some took her money, her dignity, her trust, and when nothing changed, they offered only shrugs. And then they stopped answering the door. She grew used to the sound of walking away, to watching people shift their bodies slightly to avoid her touch, to knowing that even those who once meant well had grown tired of her need. She carries that knowing still. It lives in her shoulders, slightly hunched, in her hands, always half hidden, in her walk, steady but reserved, like someone who has practiced not taking up space. You glance at her now, and something inside you wants to wrap her in a warm robe, to cover her pain, to shield her from the memory of being a burden. But she keeps walking. And that, in itself, is a kind of miracle. Because when everyone else gave up, she didn't. You think of the night she likely lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind outside and wondering how much more she could carry, wondering if this would be her life forever. And then, a story. A whisper in the dark. Jesus. He had touched the blind, and they had seen. He had spoken to the lame, and they had walked. He had spoken to people like her, instead of about them.
Maybe someone came by her home and told her they had seen him, that they had heard his voice, that they had watched a woman's tears dry as she stood tall again. She clung to that whisper like a lifeline. And now here she is, still aching, still bleeding, still unnamed, but daring to hope again. She pauses at a fountain, cupping her hands beneath a slow drip of water. She touches her lips, not to drink, but just to feel something cool. Her face is flushed, her breathing shallow. You realize the journey alone has cost her everything she had left, but she came anyway. You watch her lean against the stone, her eyes closing for a moment. What is she remembering now? Maybe the faces of those who turned her away. Maybe the pain that has become so constant she barely notices it. Or maybe she's simply steadying herself for what comes next. She takes one more step forward, and you realize she has no backup plan. If this doesn't work, there's nothing else. No more healers, no more coins, no more strength. But still, she moves. Because some faith doesn't roar, it just refuses to stop. You hear footsteps approaching from the other direction, men walking briskly, talking about Jesus, their voices full of wonder and speculation. One of them nearly bumps into her, then pauses and steps aside, eyes dropping to her hands. She doesn't respond. She just keeps going. They watch her go. You hear them whisper behind her, words she's heard before, words that sting. But she doesn't turn back, because this time her eyes are on something else. Not the crowd, not the past, just him. She's close now. You can feel it. Just around the next corner, the street opens into a larger space. More voices, more feet. The crowd is thick, the air charged with something unseen. You glance at her again and see that her eyes shine now, not with tears, but with something even more fragile: expectation. She believes, no matter how small, no matter how bruised, that something could still change, even after everything. And maybe that's the most powerful kind of faith there is, the kind that has every reason to give up and doesn't. You stay by her side, heart quiet, because in this moment, you are watching more than a woman walk. You are watching hope stand up again. The stories she'd heard. She keeps walking, and now you can sense it in her breath, faster, shallower, not from fear, not from pain, but from a rising anticipation, the kind that builds when you're near something you once only dreamed of. You glance at her face, and for the first time, you see it shift, not toward weariness, but toward wonder, because she's remembering the stories. You hear them too, echoing like quiet song beneath the noise of the street. A leper touched and cleansed, a storm stilled by a word, a funeral interrupted by life. She had heard them whispered in back rooms, murmured over fences, shared by women drawing water from the well. And for months, maybe longer, she wondered if any of them were true. She had always arrived too late, too weak to travel, too uncertain to ask. But now she's here. Now her feet carry her not on rumor, but on remembrance. She remembers the woman with the crooked back who stood straight again after he spoke. She remembers the blind beggar who cried out and how silence didn't stop him. She remembers the centurion's servant healed by a word spoken from far away. All these things, and yet none like her, because no one's story had been her story. None had suffered exactly like she had. None had bled this long, this privately, this painfully. And still, she walks. Not because she fits the stories, but because they taught her this. He sees, he stops, he touches, he hears. She touches her chest lightly, fingers curling over her heart, as if to hold those stories inside her one more time before the moment arrives. It's strange how hope works, how it rises again even after the door has slammed shut 100 times, how it stills the tremble in your knees, how it quiets every doubt with just one thought: what if it's true? She rounds the corner, and the crowd expands before her like a sea. People everywhere, some calling his name, some reaching out, some merely curious, watching from a distance. She stops, not out of fear, but out of reverence. She sees him now. Jesus. He is not standing on a platform. He is not dressed like royalty. He is not flanked by guards or banners. He's just walking. And yet, the space around him feels sacred. Even the air seems to slow. He moves through the people, not like someone commanding attention, but like someone offering peace. He listens, he turns, he touches, and her breath catches. Because he's real. He's not just a story, not just a rumor passed through sleepless nights. He is here, and so is she. You stand beside her now, close enough to hear her whisper under her breath, "If I could only touch his robe." It's not a shout, it's not a demand, it's a prayer, a hope worn thin by years and still alive. She knows she cannot speak to him. The crowd is too thick, her strength too little, her shame too long carried. But maybe, just maybe, he doesn't need to hear her voice. Maybe he'll feel it another way. Her eyes fix on the edge of his robe, the hem, the thread that brushes the dust. That will be enough. You feel it in your own breath, the moment before the miracle. Not one filled with thunder, but trembling fingers, and the weight of 12 years leaning forward. She takes a step. The crowd sways. A boy moves in front of her, then back again. She slips through. She crouches lower now, not out of shame, but so she can reach. Her veil brushes the stones. Her hand stretches. The robe swings slightly with his step. She's so close. And in her heart echoes the stories again. Not just what he did, but who he is. She believes in him, not just in what he might do, but in what he is. A healer, a restorer, the one who sees. And with one final breath, she reaches. Jesus stops. The moment unfolds like petals opening in the morning light. She rises, slowly, gently. Her knees ache from the stone. Her shoulders still tremble. But her spirit is lifting. The crowd doesn't yet know what's happening. Some murmur, glancing at Jesus, puzzled by his pause. Others look around, wondering who touched him, who he could possibly mean. But he doesn't rush. He doesn't move on. He just stands there, quiet, still, waiting. Because Jesus doesn't move past miracles like the crowd does. He dwells in them. You see it in his face, gentle, calm, a softness in his eyes that makes space for fear to fall away. He isn't searching with suspicion. He's searching with welcome. And she feels it. You can see it in the way she steps forward, head low, eyes still cast down. Not because she is ashamed, but because this moment is so full of grace, it's almost too much to bear. She knows what she received, and she knows what she must do. So she comes. From behind the crowd, parting it, not with strength, but with surrender. Hands folded, body trembling, heart open. And when she reaches him, she falls to her knees once more, not in secrecy now, but in sacred surrender. And suddenly, everything else disappears. The market noise fades. The people fade. Even the crowd's tension, their confusion, their curiosity melts away. Because something holy is happening in the stillness. She bows her head, and with a voice quiet as wind through olive branches, she begins to speak. Not rehearsed, not polished, just truth. It was me. She doesn't justify. She doesn't defend. She simply tells him everything. The years of suffering, the pain, the shame, the silent prayers, the flicker of hope, the reach, the touch, the healing. She lays it all before him, like an offering, trembling but true. And you watch his face soften even more. Not with surprise, not with pride, but with love. Love so deep it quiets the world around it. And as she speaks, the weight of her story seems to lift. Word by word, the burden releases. Word by word, her past becomes something different. Not a sentence, but a testimony. You glance at the crowd. They are quiet now. Some watch with wide eyes. Others bow their heads. A few hold their breath. Because what they're witnessing is more than a miracle. It's a meeting between a woman who dared to believe she mattered and a savior who stopped to say she was right. And in that pause, in that hush between telling and response, you feel time stretch, as if heaven itself leans in to listen. She finishes. Her hands fall silent in her lap. She doesn't ask for more. She already received what she came for. But something tells her, more is coming. Jesus kneels now, not towering above her, but with her, on the same ground, at the same level, face to face. The crowd can't hear what he will say yet, but you can, because your spirit is near, and his voice is soft, steady, kind. He is about to speak not just to her, but to the years, to the silence, to the shame, to the invisible ache that no one else ever saw. And as his breath fills the space between them, she lifts her eyes, just enough to see his.
She is afraid. Her eyes meet his now. And though her healing is already complete, her body whole, her pain gone, this moment feels even more delicate. Because now she is seen, truly seen. Not just as the woman who touched his robe, but as the woman with the story, the years, the silence, the wounds no one else bothered to understand. And it overwhelms her, not because she doubts him, but because everything inside her is still catching up to the truth. She's no longer who she was. And yet, that fear rises. You see it flicker in her expression, a shadow across light. What if he's disappointed? What if she stepped too far? What if she took what she wasn't supposed to? You watch her eyes drop again, unsure. The crowd is still hushed, watching, waiting, and she feels the weight of it. All those people, all those stares, all those years of being labeled unclean, of being the woman others whispered about, stepped away from, avoided. Even now, healed and standing before the one she came for, the memory of that shame lingers. Because that's what fear does. It clings even after the storm passes. And it whispers lies. You're not worthy of this. You stole something that wasn't yours. You should have asked. You should have stayed hidden. But he knows. Jesus sees the flicker of fear. He sees how she tries to shrink again, tries to disappear back into that old self. And he doesn't let her. Not with force, not with command, just with presence. Steady, loving, unmoving. He doesn't rush to correct. He lets her feel the full warmth of being known. Because sometimes fear isn't cast out by power, but by being held. He doesn't speak yet. He waits, lets her heart settle, lets her shame rise one last time, so he can name it and release it. You step inward with her now, imagining the swirl in her mind. Her knees press into the earth,
but her soul stands in the tension between guilt and grace. And just when the fear begins to edge her back, he leans forward. You hear him breathe in gently, and with eyes soft as sunrise, he opens his mouth. But even before his words come, she feels it. A wave of stillness. A calm like no doctor, no friend, no priest ever gave her. Not an answer, but a welcome. What would you have done if you spent a lifetime being ignored? If you risked everything for one touch and suddenly found yourself at the center of everything? Would fear rise too? Would your body remember the years it wasn't allowed to be seen? And yet, he doesn't look away. He stays. And soon, his words will rewrite her name. But for this breath, he simply holds her with his silence. Because love sometimes waits until fear lets go.
And then, she does the bravest thing of all. She lifts her head. Her breath is shallow, her body still trembles, but her heart begins to rise like the first light of dawn. She steps forward. Not physically, she's already kneeling at his feet, but inwardly. She steps out of fear, out of shame, out of years of silence and being unseen. She comes forward as someone new. The crowd watches. Some murmur, some look confused, others silent, awestruck. Even the disciples lean in slightly, their brows furrowed with wonder. And Jesus, he waits, not impatiently, not to interrogate, but to receive her. You watch her inhale, trembling, and then she speaks again. Only this time, she speaks for herself. She tells him everything. She doesn't leave parts out. She doesn't shrink from the pain. She tells the truth, not the version the world allowed her to say, but the real story. 12 years of suffering, of loss, of loneliness, of trying everything, of being told she was too far gone, of hoping again and again and again, and finally, of hearing his name and daring to believe that this time something might change. She tells him how she slipped through the alleyways, the marketplace, the crowd, how she reached, how she didn't know what would happen, only that she had to try, and how, when she touched the edge of his robe, she felt it, something leave her and something holy come in. You feel your throat tighten, because this is what healing sounds like. Not triumph, not loud celebration,
but truth, offered gently, told like a story, finally given room to breathe. And Jesus listens. He doesn't interrupt. He doesn't correct. He simply listens. And in that listening, she is restored. You feel it in the air around her. The heaviness is lifting, not just from her body, but from her spirit. She is no longer the woman who crept in secret. She is the woman who stood before the Savior and told the truth of her journey. And somehow, that honesty is part of the healing too. Because healing isn't just about being made whole. It's about being known. And here, in front of the crowd that once avoided her, she is known. Jesus kneels now, matching her posture. And in his eyes, not a trace of judgment, only honor, only love. She wipes a tear from her cheek, not in shame, but in release. She came forward and was not turned away. What would you do if this was you? Would you step forward? Would you tell your story? Even if your voice trembled? Even if your heart still carried the dust of long years? Or would you hold it in, safe but hidden? She didn't. She gave it all. And in that giving, she made room for something greater to come. You feel it now, the turning point,
not just of the moment, but of her life. And he is about to speak, not as the healer she hoped for, but as the one who names her, beloved.
Daughter, your faith has healed you. He reaches toward her now, not quickly, not with grandeur. His hand moves slowly, intentionally, like a blessing, like sunlight rising over a quiet hill, and he places it gently atop her head. She doesn't flinch, because in that hand there is no threat, only peace, only recognition. You watch her close her eyes, her body stills, and then, in a voice so soft it could calm oceans, Jesus speaks. Daughter. One word, but it changes everything. The crowd hears it, and for a moment, no one breathes. Daughter. Not woman, not stranger, not outcast. Daughter. He gives her a name she's never heard spoken over her before. Not just a title of affection, but of belonging. In that single word, he reaches past 12 years of rejection, past the silence, past the fear, and pulls her into the heart of God. She opens her eyes slowly. There's water in them, but no sorrow, not anymore. She hears the second part of his sentence now, and each syllable lands like balm. Your faith has healed you. Not your touch, not your desperation, not your effort, your faith. You see it land in her heart, because all this time people told her she wasn't enough, that she didn't have what it took, that her suffering was her fault. But here stands the Son of God, and he says the opposite, that what she did have, however fragile, however trembling, was enough to move heaven. Your faith has healed you, and not just your body, your heart, your identity, your dignity, everything.
He adds only one more line, and it wraps around her like a robe. Go in peace. It's not a dismissal. It's a commissioning. He's not sending her away. He's sending her forward. Not just to live without pain, but to walk in joy. She was healed the moment she touched his robe. But here, now, she is restored. And restoration goes beyond the skin. It reaches into memory, into shame, into the places no one else saw. You see her straighten a little, shoulders drawn back, face lifted toward the light. Not because she's proud, but because she's free. The people around her are still quiet. Some are weeping softly, others stare with awe. Even the disciples, so often unsure, stand reverently still, because they know. They have just witnessed the fullness of mercy, and mercy changes the air. She looks at Jesus one more time, eyes shining. There are no more words, only that gaze, that eternal gaze, the kind that says, you are no longer invisible. You are no longer unworthy. You are mine. And with a final nod, she turns, not back into the crowd, but forward, into the rest of her life. And every step she takes is a step in peace. Every movement a quiet echo of that one word, daughter. You breathe in slowly, letting the moment settle, because that word is for you too. When you feel unnamed, when your prayers feel unheard, when your faith feels too fragile, he sees, he stops, he speaks. And when he calls you daughter or son, he is naming what has always been true. You belong. You are whole. You are loved.
A flicker of hope. Her hand is still reaching, suspended. Air between her and the edge of his robe, no more than a breath, no more than a whisper of distance. She doesn't think. She doesn't second guess. She simply believes. Not in perfect faith, not in grand knowledge, just in hope. A flicker, small, trembling, alive. You watch her fingers tremble slightly, not from fear now, but from reverence. Her whole body leans forward, weight balanced on knees bruised by stone, shoulders hunched low so as not to be seen. But within her, something stands tall: hope. It's a strange thing, this flicker of belief. It doesn't roar, it doesn't force its way forward. It waits, it watches, and when the moment is right, it moves. And that's what she does now. She moves. Her fingers brush the edge of his garment, just barely. The hem swings as he walks, brushing the dust. It is not embroidered with jewels, not marked with glory, but she knows it is his, and that is enough. The touch is quick, soft. A second, no more, and nothing happens, at first. The crowd doesn't gasp. Jesus doesn't stop. No light from the heavens splits the sky, but something inside her shifts. She draws her hand back, folding it against her chest as if to hold the moment in. Her breathing stills. You see her eyes widen, and for a long second, she doesn't move. You wonder, did it work? Did she feel anything? Is she still waiting? And then you see it, a tear, not of pain, but of relief. It spills over slowly, carving a single path down her cheek. Her body, once so tense, begins to soften. Her shoulders lower. Her back straightens, not dramatically, but gently, like a weight is being lifted that she hadn't realized she still carried. You feel it too. The shift, the stillness, the release. Because sometimes miracles don't thunder into our lives. Sometimes they slip in like breath, like warmth after a long winter, like light returning to a room that had forgotten color. She doesn't speak, but her silence says more than words could. This flicker, this fragile, stubborn ember has found wind, and now it burns bright inside her. She touches her chest again, then her side, where the pain used to live, and it's gone. Not numbed, not reduced, gone. 12 years, gone in one sacred second. You feel your own breath catch, not because of drama, but because of stillness, because something quiet has become holy. She rises slowly now, not fully standing, but no longer bowed. Her eyes search the crowd, not for escape, not for safety, but to find the one she touched. And yet, he still walks, as if he doesn't know, as if nothing happened. But you see it in her. She knows. And that is enough, for now. You walk beside her, still close. She's holding her breath again, but this time not out of fear, out of awe, out of that stunned wonder that comes when the thing you dared to believe might happen actually does. And then a ripple in the crowd, subtle. Jesus has stopped. Just ahead, mid-step, he pauses. His head turns slightly, his shoulders still, and the people around him slow. You feel it, the moment turning. A flicker of hope has met a well of knowing, and something is about to unfold. You glance at her. Her eyes widen again, not in pain, not in confusion, but in reverent surprise, because she realizes he felt it too. And yet, he still walks, as if he doesn't know, as if nothing happened. But you see it in her. She knows, and that is enough, for now. You walk beside her, still close. She's holding her breath again, but this time not out of fear, out of awe, out of that stunned wonder that comes when the thing you dared to believe might happen actually does. And then a ripple in the crowd. Subtle. Jesus has stopped. Just ahead, mid-step, he pauses. His head turns slightly, his shoulders still, and the people around him slow. You feel it, the moment turning. A flicker of hope has met a well of knowing, and something is about to unfold. You glance at her. Her eyes widen again, not in pain, not in confusion, but in reverent surprise, because she realizes he felt it too.
Through the alleyways. The woman stands at the edge of the clearing crowd, her heart pounding with the quiet knowledge of what just happened. And yet, before we continue in the moment where Jesus turns, let's step back, just for a breath, and return to where her journey began that day. Before the robe, before the miracle, there were alleyways. Twisting paths between mud brick homes, the smells of cooking lentils and open earth. There were children playing in the dust, women drawing water, men carrying baskets of olives, loaves of bread, folded linen. And in the shadows, her, moving between the walls like a shadow herself, head lowered, robe pulled close. She didn't want to be seen, not like this, not with this pain, not with this past. But she came anyway. She passed through places that once held memories. The home of a woman who used to sit with her in the market, now silent. The steps of a healer who once promised much and delivered little. The wall where she used to rest when walking became too hard. Everything she passed reminded her of who she'd been and who she no longer was, but also who she still hoped she could become. You watch her footsteps trace through sunbeams filtered through hanging laundry. Cats peer from rooftops. A pot crashes in a nearby doorway. But she doesn't flinch. Every sense is focused forward, toward him. Each alley feels longer than it is, not because of distance, but because of weight. Each step she takes presses into the past and calls the present forward. She turns a corner. Someone glances at her, frowns, moves aside. She's used to it. Her presence makes others uncomfortable because she is a reminder of suffering, of waiting, of wounds that don't heal quickly. But today, she doesn't shrink beneath their gaze. Today, she walks through it. You can see it in her hands again, open now, no longer clenched in shame. Her fingers twitch as if remembering prayers long forgotten. In these alleyways, she lets go of more than physical pain. She lets go of being invisible, of being whispered about, of carrying her story like a burden instead of a testimony. And maybe this is part of the miracle too. Not just the healing to come, but the courage before it. The belief that moves you through tight, narrow spaces, past familiar griefs and silent glances, through doorways of memory and out into light. Because the alleyways aren't just stone and dust. They are thresholds. And she walks through them not because she is strong, but because she is willing. You pause now, watching her emerge from the last of the winding turns. The light shifts as she enters a wider path. The air smells different, fresher, touched with myrrh and sun-warmed oil. Ahead, the noise of the crowd begins to rise. Laughter, feet, shouting, curiosity, expectation. But behind her, quiet. The alleyways have closed. Not literally, but in spirit. She will not return to them as the same woman. You follow her as she steps from shadow into sun. It's not just a turn in the road. It's resurrection. And maybe you've walked those alleyways too. Not in body, but in spirit. Maybe you've carried a hidden ache, moved quietly through places where you used to feel whole.
avoided faces who once called your name, held your breath beneath the weight of what you lost. If so, then you've been here too. And maybe this is what healing begins with: a step through the narrow, a prayer whispered in shadow, a robe still far off but closer than before. She pauses now, hand on the final wall. Her eyes lift, and there, just beyond the next street, is Jesus. Still moving, still near, still within reach. The alleyways are behind her, but her story is just beginning.
The marketplace buzz. The light pours down brighter now as the woman steps into the open street. Gone are the quiet alleyways, replaced by sound, waves of sound. The marketplace is alive. Vendors calling out their prices, clay pots clinking, baskets of pomegranates, herbs, dried fish, fresh bread. Flies buzz lazily over figs. A donkey brays. Children run past, laughing, tugging at robes, their sandals slapping the stone. The scent of cumin and coriander hangs in the air, sweetened by honey and warm oil. It's the kind of place that demands attention, but she sees none of it. She hears none of it, because she's listening for something else, someone else, Jesus. She has no plan, no route, no certainty, only a name and a direction. You watch her pause near a stall of wool-dyed garments. A merchant leans toward her with a handful of fabric, red, blue, pale linen. She doesn't even notice. Her eyes are scanning the crowd, her breathing shallow. You feel it too now, the energy in the air, something stirring beneath the surface of all this ordinary noise. The people are beginning to move, not just for business, but for curiosity. Heads are turning, questions whispered, faces brightening with recognition. Because he's near. He must be. You see a man point. There, that's him. And now the crowd pulses. People begin walking faster. Some run. Some bring children forward by the hand. Others move more slowly, reverently, but they move. And so does she. Not quickly, not loudly, just forward. You walk beside her, matching her pace. She steps carefully around baskets, through knots of people, past women balancing water jars, past wide-eyed boys pressing their palms to their hearts. There is awe here, and excitement, and hunger, spiritual hunger. And she feels it too, but hers is different. Not excitement, not thrill, need, a deeper kind of hunger. You can see it in the way she weaves through the crowd, not with aggression, but with purpose. There's no time to hesitate, but she also doesn't push. She simply moves, drawn towards something real. You notice the way people react as they pass him. A gasp, a stilled breath, a dropped parcel. Not because of anything he says, but simply because of his presence. And though she's still a distance away, she feels it too. You see her eyes shift. That robe, that stride, that stillness amid the noise. It's him. And suddenly, the marketplace seems quieter, not in sound, but in spirit. As if all the shouting fades into the background. As if heaven is pressing its ear to this street. She places a hand over her chest. You can feel the rhythm of her pulse, not from panic, but from longing. You glance to your left and see another woman drop to her knees, weeping at the sight of him. A man calls out, "Rabbi, Rabbi, look this way." Others simply watch with eyes full of questions. And then there is her, still walking, still holding to one thought. If I can just touch him. You move through the crowd with her now. The press of bodies grows tighter. People jostling, arms brushing, sandals scraping stone. She bends low again, not dramatically,
just enough to move under the elbows and cloaks of the people around her. You watch her eyes, locked on the edge of his robe. No one sees her, but heaven does. She is almost there. What would you do with the weight of 12 years behind you? Would you let one more crowd keep you from hope? Or would you keep moving, quietly, gently, through the noise, through the dust, through the marketplace full of every reason to give up, for just one touch? She steps closer, and the hem swings, and hope holds its breath.
At the edge of the crowd, there she is, only a few steps away now. The press of people swells around her like a living sea, robes and cloaks rippling with motion, sandals brushing against sandals, hands reaching, elbows grazing shoulders. Voices rise and fall in layers, some calling his name, others just whispering in wonder. But she hears none of it. She is focused, utterly, absolutely focused. Jesus is walking slowly, calmly. He's surrounded, shoulder to shoulder, by disciples and strangers alike. His hands move occasionally, touching a shoulder, reaching to lift a child, offering stillness to the storm of need around him. And yet, he feels untouched. Not distant, not aloof, but centered, as if he knows exactly where he is meant to be, exactly who needs him next. She watches him closely, her eyes never leaving his figure. This man, the one she's heard about in whispers and fragments, the one who touched lepers, the one who dined with sinners, the one who calmed the sea. And she thinks, if he did all that, surely he can heal me too. She stops, just for a breath, on the edge of the crowd. It's the closest she's ever been. One more step and she'll be within reach. But now the doubts creep in, not loudly, just quietly, like wind curling around the edges of her robe. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm not enough? What if I ruin everything by trying? She presses a hand to her heart, feeling the flutter in her chest. The voices around her blur. She no longer hears what they're saying. Her focus narrows again, and all she sees is the hem of his robe. That's all I need, she thinks, just that. Not his hand, not his words, not his attention, just the edge, the very fringe, because in that thread, she believes, there's more healing than in all the words she's ever heard from physicians or priests. You watch her crouch slightly, her body moving with care. Not out of shame this time, but reverence. She is about to enter holy space. The moment before her is no longer about being healed. It's about trusting that she's allowed to be, that she doesn't have to earn it, that she doesn't have to explain it. Just reach. Just believe. She closes her eyes for a heartbeat, breathes in, lets the fear melt,
and then opens them again, clearer now, brighter. You realize she has made peace with whatever happens next. If she is healed, she will rejoice. If she is not, she will still have tried. But in this sliver of time, this pause before the touch, she knows that her life is not held by outcomes. It is held by him, and that is enough. Her knees press into the stone. Her hand reaches through the moving legs of strangers, slipping between the crowd, unseen. And the world, for her, quiets. What would you have done? Would you have held back? Would you have waited for permission? Or would you, like her, reach from the edge? Trust from the margins? Believe that the hymn was enough? You feel it now, something eternal leaning close. The crowd doesn't notice her, but heaven does. Her hand moves forward, closer, closer. The bridegroom's surprise. The groom stands a little straighter now, the cup still in his hand. His lips are parted in a smile that doesn't quite know where to land, somewhere between amazement and bewilderment. He casts a glance at his new bride across the courtyard, where she laughs with her friends, unaware of the praise he's just received. The steward walks away, still murmuring to himself, shaking his head as if the taste still lingers on his tongue, defying logic. The groom looks down at the wine again. You watch as he takes another sip, slower this time, as if trying to commit the flavor to memory. You move closer, close enough to see the shimmer of candlelight reflecting in the deep red liquid. It glows like garnet, and for a fleeting moment, you wonder what it looked like the very instant it changed. Not that it matters. The miracle wasn't in the spectacle, it was in the grace. The groom sets the cup down gently on the table, still watching the guests with a kind of stunned joy. He didn't ask for a miracle, he didn't even know he needed one, and yet, there it is. You take in the full scene now. The bride dancing, her veil catching in the breeze. The mother of the groom dabbing her eyes with the corner of her sleeve. Children sneaking olives from platters, giggling behind cupped hands. And wine, flowing again, full and abundant. No one announces what happened. No one points to the jars or the man who sits silently by the edge of the feast, watching with peace in his eyes. Because this miracle wasn't about being seen. It was about being spared. Spared from embarrassment. Spared from shame. Spared from a moment that could have quietly fractured something joyful. You feel the truth of it settle deep in your chest. Sometimes the greatest mercy is not in grand rescues, but in quiet preventions. In troubles that never quite arrived because grace moved first. You glance at Jesus again. He isn't looking at the groom. He's feeding a small piece of fig to a child who smiles, sleepy-eyed and soft. His presence isn't loud. It's protective, gentle, fatherly. The groom, unaware of who made the wine, simply lifts his cup again and joins the dance floor, folding his hands around his bride as the music swells. He whispers something in her ear that makes her smile widen.
You smile too, because you know their wedding was saved by a miracle they may never understand. And that's the kind of miracle you long for, one that doesn't demand credit, only brings joy. How many times has that happened in your own life? When something held together, when joy wasn't cut short, when shame didn't come, and you never even knew who to thank. You sit on a low bench near the vine-covered wall, watching the glow from the torches flicker on the stone path. A servant passes you a cup, and this time you take it. It tastes rich, warming, like sunlight stored in fruit, like something ancient and kind. And it's more than just wine. It's a reminder that sometimes, when you are unaware, He is still working, still pouring, still protecting what you didn't even know was at risk. The music rises again, feet tapping in rhythm, clapping beginning on the far side of the courtyard. The groom spins his bride with care, his earlier concern already forgotten. There's no tension in his brow now, only light, only joy. You close your eyes for a moment and simply listen. To the laughter, to the tambourines, to the joy that flows without interruption. You remember the jars. You remember the ladle. You remember the servant's quiet obedience, and the space where water became wine without anyone watching. What would you have done standing in the groom's place? Would you have questioned the praise? Tried to explain away the mystery? Or would you, like him, simply smile and let joy take your hand? The murmur of wonder. The feast carries on, golden and glowing. Laughter ripples through the night air like wind through tall grass, subtle, graceful, full of life. The music loops into a gentler melody now, soothing the children who've begun curling up near their mother's laps. The servants, once on edge, now stand more relaxed, some swaying quietly to the rhythm, their earlier task behind them, but still echoing in their thoughts.
You sit beneath an olive tree at the edge of the courtyard. From here, the scene unfolds like a painted scroll. Soft torchlight, dancing shadows, the low thrum of conversation. It's all so unremarkable, and yet you feel something shifting under the surface. The steward has said his piece. The wine has been poured again and again. And now, something else is happening. Not dramatic, not sudden, but unmistakable. A quiet murmur, like a shared breath. You notice it first in a pair of older guests sitting near the hearth. One leans to the other, speaking low, eyes flicking to his cup and then to the crowd. A shrug, a small shake of the head, but then a smile, a knowing one. Then another, near the fig platter. A woman tilts her head curiously as she tastes the wine. She nods slowly, and though she says nothing, her eyes soften. You begin to hear the whispers scattered like seeds in the breeze. Did you taste this? It's better than before. I wonder who brought it. It's not loud, it's not public, but something is rising. Not the miracle itself, no one's calling it that, not yet, but the awe that follows in its wake. The recognition that something beautiful has happened and no one quite knows how. You watch as two of the servants pass each other, exchanging the smallest glance. They say nothing, but you can see it in their faces. They know. And they hold that knowledge tenderly, like a candle cupped in the palm. Protected, precious. You close your eyes and take a deep breath. This is the afterglow of grace. Not the moment itself, but its echoes. A subtle spreading of warmth, like dye dropped into water. At first, barely visible. And then, all at once, everything has changed. It reminds you of those moments in your own life where something unexplainably worked out, where a burden lightened without warning, where provision arrived before the panic, where sorrow gave way to peace, and you couldn't say how or when. But you knew. You knew it wasn't coincidence. You knew it had been cared for, even if quietly, even if invisibly, even if no one else knew. You rise from your seat and walk toward the center of the celebration. The groom spins his bride again, her feet barely brushing the stones. Music swells for just a moment, full of wind and string and joy. The crowd claps in rhythm, and a few guests link hands in a small circle. They laugh, heads tossed back, cheeks glowing in firelight. And you realize something. This miracle wasn't just for the groom. It wasn't just for the steward. It wasn't even just for the servants. It was for everyone, whether they noticed or not. That's the generosity of Jesus. He didn't wait to be thanked. He didn't limit the wine to those who understood. He let it flow for all, even those who never knew a miracle occurred. You turn slightly and see Mary watching, her face soft, her hands folded in her lap. She sits beneath the same olive tree where you stood earlier. Her eyes move from guest to guest, glowing not with pride, but peace. Because she knew he would respond, and he did. She saw the need, she spoke it gently, and trusted that love would move. You wonder if she too sees the murmur now, this gentle ripple of awe spreading from table to table like evening light. You wonder if she hears what you hear, the soft gasp of wonder not yet named. And you wonder, how often has God moved on your behalf without your noticing? How many times has joy been restored to you without the story ever being told? You walk once more past the jars. Their surfaces are shadowed now, the night growing cooler. They're still, uncelebrated, and yet they held the miracle. And you remember again, it wasn't the jars that mattered. It was what he chose to fill. And why? A mother's knowing smile. She sits alone now, Mary, on a stone bench beneath the canopy of vines, her hands resting gently in her lap. There's a softness about her, something beyond composure. It is the peace of someone who sees further than others do, who understands things not through noise, but through quiet knowing. You watch her from across the courtyard. The celebration swirls around her, laughter, dancing, music, clinking cups. But Mary seems untouched by the motion, not distant, not removed, just anchored. You walk slowly toward her, drawn by the stillness she holds. As you approach, she turns her face slightly toward you, offering a smile so small and so full of meaning that it settles something inside you. She says nothing. She doesn't have to, because her smile carries 1,000 stories. You sit beside her, and together you look out over the wedding. The groom is glowing, his bride radiant with joy. The steward now moves easily between tables, pouring another round of the wine he still cannot explain. Servants carry platters of bread and honey-dipped fruit. The night feels weightless. Mary watches them all, eyes soft, gaze steady. You can't help yourself. Quietly, you ask her, "You knew he would do it, didn't you?" She doesn't answer at first. She just breathes, slowly. Then she says, "He listens, always, but he does things in his time, not mine." You nod, absorbing the words. There's no pride in her voice, no hint of superiority, just love, deep-rooted love, like the love that waits not for results, but for purpose. She continues, "I didn't ask him to change the water. I only told him there was no wine. I trusted that if he responded, it would be right." Her eyes never leave the celebration. And in that moment, you understand something profound. Her faith wasn't in what he would do. It was in who he was. She didn't need details. She didn't ask for signs. She just made space for him, for his timing, for whatever form grace would take. You sit back against the vine-covered wall, letting the scent of blossoms drift around you. The air is cool now, laced with the softness of night. Mary adjusts her shawl, her hands moving slowly, deliberately, like someone accustomed to waiting well. You think about the times in your life when you've brought your need before heaven, when your voice, perhaps small and trembling, whispered something like, "I've run out of strength, out of hope, out of direction." And you wonder, what if the answer wasn't delay? What if it was timing? What if the stillness was not absence, but preparation? What if grace was already being poured, unseen, like water filling jars behind the scenes? Mary leans forward slightly, resting her elbows on her knees. Her eyes glisten just a little as she watches the guests. "He doesn't need crowds," she says quietly. "He doesn't need noise. He just needs an opening." You let her words settle in the quiet between you. An opening. Not a demand. Not a deadline. Just a space in the heart where trust lives. You glance again at Jesus. He's near the far side of the courtyard now, speaking with an elder. His posture is easy, his presence warm. You realize he never once pointed to himself tonight, never drew attention, never stepped into the center. And yet, every part of the celebration bears his touch. Mary follows your gaze. "This is how he begins," she murmurs. You look at her. "Begins?" She nods, slowly. "It won't be the last. There will be many signs, some big, some quiet like this, but all of them will carry the same heart." You close your eyes, letting the thought rest in you. The same heart. One that sees need before it's spoken. One that moves without demanding credit. One that preserves joy, quietly, reverently, fully. A moment passes between you and Mary, quiet and full, the kind that doesn't need to be filled with words. And then she smiles again, that small, knowing smile. The kind of smile a mother gives when she sees not just what her child has done, but who he is becoming. And you feel something in your chest loosen, a breath, a weight, a long-held wonder, because you're beginning to see it too. Walking with Jesus afterward. The celebration begins to slow, though joy still lingers like warm light on the stones. Candles burn lower in their clay holders. The music, once lively, now drifts like a lullaby, threading its way around quiet conversations and tired laughter. The guests begin to part, murmuring blessings and farewells. Lanterns are carried through darkened alleyways, and the scent of crushed time clings to the night. Somewhere, a child falls asleep in her father's arms. And you, without needing a word, find yourself walking beside him. Jesus. He steps lightly, the hem of his robe brushing against pebbles and dry grass. His posture is relaxed, hands loosely folded behind his back. He says nothing at first, and neither do you. The silence is comfortable, like old friends walking familiar paths. The moon hangs low, silvering the hills beyond Cana. A soft wind moves through the trees, ruffling olive branches and cooling your skin. You walk this road in peace, not because you understand everything, but because you feel safe here. He glances at you once, and in that look is something immeasurable: gentleness, welcome, knowing. You want to speak, maybe to thank him, or to ask him how he did it, but no words form, and that's all right. The quiet speaks enough. Eventually, he asks, "Did you enjoy the feast?" His voice is low and unhurried, like water over smooth stones. You nod, smiling. "Very much." He nods, eyes forward again, the corners of his mouth lifting just slightly. "Weddings are sacred things," he says, "not just for the couple, but for the village, for everyone who comes. Joy is meant to be shared." You think of the groom, the bride, the way they glowed with laughter. "They didn't even know what happened," you say softly. He smiles again, this time a little more visible. "They didn't need to." The path turns gently, the stone houses behind you now. The land opens out toward quiet fields. In the distance, a shepherd's lantern flickers near a sleeping flock. You take a breath, feeling the night settle into your bones. "Why did you do it?" you ask. "Why start this way?" He doesn't answer right away. Instead, he crouches near a cluster of wildflowers growing between the rocks. He touches a bloom with 2 fingers, careful not to disturb it. "I begin with joy," he says finally, "because it's what people forget they're allowed to keep." His words settle into the stillness between you. You hadn't thought of that, not in those terms. But it's true. You think of all the things that try to steal joy: fear, pride, duty, weariness. And yet tonight, none of those held space. Only celebration, only peace. You walk a little further. He speaks again, softer now. "People will remember the wine, but the real gift was that no one had to be ashamed." You think of the groom's wide smile, the steward's praise, the crowd's ease, all because of a miracle that wasn't announced, a miracle that slipped in through a whisper and stayed long enough to fill every cup. You realize how much of life happens in moments just like that. Small, invisible graces, needs met before they became burdens, doors opened before you realized you were at the threshold. He looks at you again, eyes steady. "Do you see now?" You nod slowly. "Yes," you whisper, "because you do." You see that the miracle wasn't just about the transformation of water. It was the protection of joy, the covering of dignity, the quiet presence of love. You think of the servants, the jars, the gentle obedience that preceded the wonder. You think of Mary, her trust, her knowing smile. You think of the night air now, carrying this story like incense, rising, fragrant, real. And most of all, you think of him, Jesus, not only powerful, not only holy, but tender, willing to step into a small village feast to make sure joy wasn't lost. Not for applause, not for recognition, but because that's what love does. The road stretches on, the stars overhead whispering ancient songs. He walks beside you still, not rushing, not guiding, just with you. And that, somehow, is the greatest miracle of all. The crowd grows still. The woman turns to go, her robe trailing behind her like the shedding of an old life. And for a long moment, no one moves. The marketplace that buzzed only minutes ago, the same one that swelled with noise and need and pushing and reaching, now holds its breath. People stand in stillness, not because they understand what just happened, but because they feel it. The weight of something holy, the hush of something sacred. Even the air has changed. You can feel it brushing gently across your skin, not as wind, but as reverence. The woman walks slowly, not hiding, not slipping away, but passing through the very crowd that once never saw her. And now they part for her. Not out of obligation, but awe. It's not the kind of awe that shouts or demands attention. It's the kind that whispers, "We just saw heaven touch the earth." You see people glance at one another, as if asking, "Did you feel that too?" A mother holds her child tighter. A merchant lowers his head, hand on his chest. Even the disciples, so often caught between understanding and wonder, stand still, eyes following her as she moves farther away. She doesn't look back. She doesn't need to. Her healing is not behind her. It is within her. Jesus remains in place for a moment, his hand now resting by his side. His eyes follow her path, not to monitor her steps, but to honor them. You can tell, he's smiling inside. Because this stillness, this hush, is not the result of power displayed. It's the result of love revealed. One woman, one touch, and now a crowd stilled, not by command, but by grace. You wonder what they're thinking. Some may be confused, some may be convicted, but many are beginning to believe. Because they just watched something impossible unfold without thunder or spectacle. It came in silence, in faith, in a trembling reach toward mercy. You glance to your left. A boy stares, eyes wide, clutching his father's hand. To your right, an elder sits back slowly onto a bench, whispering a prayer you can't quite hear. You feel your own chest loosen. Because this story, it doesn't just belong to her. It belongs to all of us. Every one of us who has ever carried something too long. Every one of us who's ever felt unseen. Every one of us who's ever dared to hope again after the world told us not to. You glance at Jesus again. He begins to walk. Slowly, quietly, not in haste, not in pride. As if nothing extraordinary just happened. But you know, everything changed. And still the crowd stands, listening to the silence he left behind. Because silence can speak. It can tell a better story than noise. And right now, it speaks of a woman made whole, of a crowd reminded, of a Savior who stops. What would you have done standing in that crowd? Would you have reached too? Would you have stepped back? Would you have dared to believe that such a moment was for you? You're still standing here. The dust is settling. The hush lingers. And inside your heart, a question rises. If he did it for her, could he do it for me too? A new beginning. The crowd begins to stir again, slowly, as if waking from a sacred dream. Some return to their baskets, their errands, their travel. Others linger, quiet, marked. The marketplace sounds begin to hum once more, but the tone has changed. There is gentleness in it now, a softness, as if the entire place has been touched by mercy. But you keep your eyes on her. The woman. She walks through the narrow streets now, not hunched, not hidden, not with her veil pulled low.
She walks with peace, a kind of peace that doesn't always show in posture, but in presence. Each step is deliberate, but not heavy. She no longer carries her suffering. She carries her story. There is a difference, because now it belongs to her, not to her pain. You watch her pause at a small fountain near the city wall, the same one she passed earlier on her way to find him. She places her hands beneath the water, cool and clear, and splashes it gently on her face. The drops fall like tears, but they aren't from sorrow. They are cleansing, releasing. She looks around, not nervously, not guiltily, but freely. As if for the first time, she realizes she's not invisible. She's not unclean. She's not broken. She's not the woman who doesn't belong. She's the woman who believed and was made whole. She touches her own arm lightly, as if reminding herself that this body, her body, is still hers. But now, without pain. She smiles. It's small, private, but radiant, like light through olive leaves. You follow her path through the outer village, where fig trees lean over stone fences and birds perch along the rooftops. Familiar faces see her, and their brows furrow, not in judgment, but in recognition. They see it. Something has changed. She meets their eyes now, something she hasn't done in years. She doesn't explain. She doesn't need to. She simply nods, as if to say, I am no longer who I was, and they sense it. You feel your own heart swell at the sight of it, because healing isn't just about what leaves, it's about what begins. And this moment is the beginning of something entirely new. A life that's not ruled by pain. A soul no longer.
If you let healing in, if you stepped out from hiding, if you believed that wholeness wasn't just possible, but promised, she walks inside now, her home no longer a shelter from the world, but a sanctuary of peace. You stand in the quiet street and feel it too. Not an ending, a beginning. And every beginning starts with a step. She took hers, and now it's your turn. The disciples remember. The road stretches out once more. Jesus walks ahead now, sandals brushing the dust, his robe swaying gently with every step. The crowd has dispersed, but his disciples remain close, still quiet, still turning over the moment in their minds. You walk beside them, and you can feel it too. Something has shifted. Not in the sky, not in the ground, but in the space between faith and understanding. One of them speaks, softly, as if not to disturb the holiness still hanging in the air. Did you see how she touched him? Another nods. She didn't even speak. She just reached. A third adds, and he stopped, just for her. They're piecing it together now, not just what happened, but why it mattered. You can almost hear their thoughts. So many people were pressing in. So many brushed against him. But this was different. Because she didn't come to see him, she came to be changed by him. And that made all the difference. Jesus continues walking, calm as ever, the same pace, the same presence. But the disciples, something in them is awakening. Because now, faith is no longer just what they've been taught. It's what they've seen. You hear one of them repeat his words, quietly. Daughter, your faith has healed you. And that one word, daughter, hangs in the air like incense. They'd heard him teach in temples. They'd watched him calm storms. But this was something new. A woman, hidden by the world, lifted by one word. A miracle drawn not by proximity, but by belief. And now the disciples begin to see. Faith isn't loud. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to come with the right words or the right status. It simply needs to reach. You feel your own heart shift with that truth, because maybe they needed to see this as much as she needed to be healed. Maybe you did too. Jesus slows near a hillside, pausing to drink from a leather flask. He looks out over the land. Quiet olive groves in the distance, pale wildflowers brushing in the breeze. The disciples gather around, but no one speaks for a moment. You sense their stillness is not just physical, it's inward, settling, reflecting. One of them, younger than the rest, finally breaks the silence. She believed in the hem of his robe. Another responds, and he met her there. They nod, and you do too, because now they understand. He doesn't just respond to bold cries or dramatic gestures. He responds to faith, however quiet, however small. Even a touch from behind. Even a heart too weary to speak. You watch them as they continue walking, dust rising behind their feet. They won't forget her. None of them will. Because what they saw today will stay in their memory, long after the miracles of the crowds. They saw what faith feels like, what it looks like in the hands of someone who's been broken and
The lesson in the quiet touch. Night has come. The road is behind you now, and the stars have taken their places in the quiet sky. Olive trees sway gently, their leaves whispering like old prayers. A fire crackles in the distance, warm and low, its glow casting soft gold across the stone walls nearby. You sit beneath one of the trees, the bark solid against your back, the memory of the day resting gently in your chest. She touched his robe. That's how it began. And yet, it was never really about the fabric. It was about the faith behind the reach. You close your eyes and remember her, not just what she did, but what she became. Not just healed, but seen, loved, restored. The hem was only the beginning. Because what really touched her was not the thread in his garment, but the mercy that filled it. You think of your own quiet reaches, the whispered prayers in the dark, the silent tears you never spoke aloud, the moments when your voice felt too small, too tired, too unworthy to rise. And yet, maybe those were the moments he felt most. Maybe the faith that lives in silence speaks louder than you know. Because she didn't ask. She didn't demand. She didn't even speak. She just believed. And when her fingertips brushed his robe, her story was no longer about suffering. It became about sacred courage. The courage to come forward, to trust, to say yes to healing, even when fear still whispered, "You don't belong." But love answered louder, "You are mine." You breathe in slowly. That same love surrounds you now. Not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, unmoving, always near. You imagine his eyes, soft with knowing, his voice gentle with invitation, his hand always reaching back for yours. And you begin to wonder, what if healing begins not in being strong, but in being willing? Willing to reach, willing to trust, willing to come forward, even if your knees still tremble. She reached, and he stopped. She feared, and he named her. She came in silence, and left with peace. You feel it now, wrapping around you like a cloak in the quiet. Peace.
Not because life is perfect, but because love is present. The crowd has gone. The road is still. But her story lives on. In you, in every soul who has ever dared to hope again after years of pain. Because he still walks. He still listens. He still stops. Even for the quietest touch. Even for you.
Now the fire is only embers. The night is full of hush. And her story has found its rest in you. You can still see the hem of his robe in your mind's eye, simple, dust-covered, trailing behind the steps of love. That's where it happened. That's where her whole world changed. And it never needed an audience. Only faith. Only a heart ready to believe, even if it trembled. Even if it whispered. Even if it knelt in the background. You've walked with her now. You've felt her pain, her longing, her courage. And maybe, somewhere deep inside, part of her story is your own. Maybe you've waited years for something to change. Maybe your voice has grown quiet. Maybe all you have left is a reach. If so, let this night remind you, that's enough. You are not forgotten. You are not too far gone. You are not invisible. You are seen. And the same Jesus who turned to her still turns toward you, still stops, still calls, still speaks peace. So breathe deeply now. Let your shoulders soften. Let your jaw release. Let your spirit settle. You've walked through pain. You've touched the edge of hope. And now you can rest in it. Because faith doesn't always look like boldness. Sometimes it looks like surrender. Sometimes it looks like sleep. So let go. Sink into the stillness. You are safe. You are held. You are so very deeply loved. And now, let the quiet carry you. Let the warmth of his presence wrap around you like a soft blanket of mercy. Let the story fade, like candlelight.